The 90s was an era in the NBA dominated by one team. Well, to be fair, one player. But it was also known as the golden era for toughness and physical inside basketball, with big men and enforcers dominating the paint who would put you on your back if you entered their domain. And at the forefront of the style of play in this epoch was the gritty, rock-hard New York Knicks. In recent years, the Knicks have been dragged through the mud by the media and its fans, and for good reason, as they have been a dumpster fire of a franchise for pretty much the entirety of 2 decades at this point. So it's kinda hard to come to grips with the fact that they were once a good, respectable and well-managed franchise. But they were. They were once tough, hard-nosed, defensive-minded and feared around the league. In the 12 seasons between 1988 and 2000, they made the playoffs every year and won 16 playoff series, making it to the NBA Finals twice. To put that into perspective, they've won 1 playoff series in the 19 seasons since that stretch. But they never raised the Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of the season, even though they got painfully close. But to tell the story of the 1990s New York Knicks, we have to start in 1985. In the 1985 drafts, the draft lottery is introduced for the first time, and the number 1 pick is the team whose logo is picked first out of a drum of white envelopes. Maybe coincidentally, but probably not, Commissioner David Stearns pulls out the envelope with the Knicks logo in it. And with that pick, they chose the greatest NBA prospect by a long mile, Patrick Ewing. Ewing at the time that he was drafted was pretty much the only promising part of the team until 1987, when the Knicks selected Mark Jackson, who didn't just win Rookie of the Year, but also got 2 MVP points in the MVP vote at the end of the season. The team just needed one more move before the resurgence of the franchise was completed. So in 1988, they traded center Bill Cartwright for the Big Oak, Charles Oakley, pretty much the baddest, toughest enforcer that has ever played in the league. The Knicks were now pretty good, which is not a sentence anyone nowadays is used to hearing. They won the 1989 division title with a 52-30 record, but were defeated in the second round by the Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls. You should probably get used to hearing that, by the way. The next season began with a coaching change, as Rick Pitino handed the reins over to Stu Jackson. And they make it back to the playoffs with a 45-37 record, but are swept in the second round, this time by the Bad Boys era Detroit Pistons. The next season, another coaching change takes place as Jackson is replaced by John McLeod, and the Knicks barely inch their way into the playoffs, just to be swept by the Bulls in the first round. And for a 3rd year in a row, they change head coaches as McLeod is replaced by the Patrick Riley. 4-time champ as a coach, and one of the most hard-nosed and defensive-minded coaches ever in the NBA. Following the trend of toughness and defense, Pat Riley in his first season began to lean more on his undrafted point guard, John Starks, who was known for his ferocity and competitiveness on the court. Pat Riley, with his no-layups defense, leads the Knicks into the 90s as one of the most feared and physical teams on the court. Oh, and what's no-layups defense, you ask? It essentially means that if an opposing player is coming down the lane for a layup, you defend him like this.
Pippen, oh, he is ripped by Starks, and that could be, yes, it is a flagrant foul. Pippen is shaken up.
They improve in the 92 season and defeat the Pistons in the first round of the playoffs. Their first round victory earned the Knicks a matchup with the Chicago Bulls for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. And you remember how they got swept in their last meeting? Well, the Knicks showed a little more fight this time, as the physical play, trash talking, and defensive intensity was on full display for the entire series. And so, the heated Knicks-Bulls rivalry had truly come into its own.
Heartbreak gets inside and hammered by Oakley. That's going to be 2 shots at the ball. We already see the presence of...
hit hard by Anthony, and Michael threw the ball at Anthony, and Michael wants a piece of him. Jordan is very upset. They're going to call it a flagrant foul. Oh, they're about to break something out down there.
Now, this is very important right now. New York has got to get away from this right now. They have the lead.
Boy, this is 7-game playoff basketball at its best right now.
Conway. Oh, Armstrong and Starks want to go at each other. Stolen. Saw the aggressive play once again off that steal. Timeout was called. Both clubs going at each other. Michael Jordan and Xavier McDaniel having words. Double technicals were called on McDaniel and Jordan. Scott Williams able to get to the loose ball, but he's followed up Jordan with the recovery, and Jordan is fouled. The basket counts and a foul, and Michael Jordan very upset about the way he was muscled.
Game 1 showed that the Knicks were going to put up a worthy fight against the top-seeded Bulls, as center Patrick Ewing put up 34 points, 16 rebounds, and 6 blocks to defeat the Bulls. And if you were wondering how New York basketball was played in the 90s, this was just the third defensive possession for the Knicks in the series.
First quarter from Chicago Stadium. Cartwright gets inside, is hammered by Oakley. That's going to be 2 shots in the ball.
And that pretty much set the tone. After exchanging hard fouls and heaps of trash talking, Chicago would eventually take the upper hand in the series, going into Game 6 being up 3-2. But with the game closed for most of the evening, Ewing sprains his ankle midway through the third quarter, making him play the rest of the game and series with a visible limp. Looking like the series was going to fall to Chicago, the Knicks, despite Ewing's injury, take over in the fourth quarter and win the game 100-89, pushing the series to a Game 7.
What a performance!
Before we go to Game 7, let me give you some context about this series. The Bulls were defending champs as they had defeated the Lakers in the season before to win the first title for the franchise. In the 91-92 season, they put up a 67-15 record, the best in the league, and the evening right after the Game 7 against the Knicks, Michael Jordan is presented with his second straight MVP award, as he leads the league in scoring for a 6th straight season. So to say that the Knicks were underdogs is a bit of an understatement, and the fact that they have pushed the series to 7 games has put the league and the media in a bit of a frenzy. So let's enter Chicago Stadium for Game 7. Early on in the game, the Knicks let it be known that they were not afraid of the defending champs by playing physical and going straight to the face of Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. But once upon a time, there was a guy they called Air. While focusing their efforts on taking Scottie Pippen out of the game using hard fouls like this, Michael Jordan had put up 29 points in the first half. But the Knicks followed their doctrine of no layups defense and trailed only 56-51 at halftime. But when the second half came around, Michael Jordan started having sequences like this.
Splitting through. Jordan with the steal. And then it's stolen by Starks. McDaniel chased by Jordan. It's a clean block.
Whose game is it? It's Michael Jordan's game.
And that's why Magic said before, he was demanding the basketball from his teammates. He knows right now, he's got it, he feels it, he splits the potential trap, and then after scoring, comes right back with a terrific defensive play.
Despite continuing to play tough, the Knicks struggled to score against the Bulls, and as they couldn't contain Jordan, they ended up getting blown out, losing 110-81, with MJ putting up 42 points. But as Jordan would say himself, the Knicks had pushed the Bulls to 7 when they were really meant to sweep them.
You gotta give this New York team credit, man. They pushed us to the limits. They really played extremely well.
So although they exited in the second round, it was clear by 1992 that the Knicks mean business, and they were going to be a force to be reckoned with for some time going forwards. With a promising core going into next season, the Knicks climbed to the top of the Eastern Conference with a 60-22 record, and their leader Patrick Ewing finishing 4th in the MVP voting. The Knicks continued their mantra of no layups defense, which resulted in some pretty violent plays.
Anderson is walloped by Starks. It counts and a flagrant.
This defensive strategy eventually led to an on-court brawl with the best team in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns. The brawl resulted in the handing out of 12 technical fouls, 5 ejections, 3 suspensions, and 21 fines. It was one of the most serious and violent brawls the league had ever seen, and the commissioner ended up imposing stricter rules and heavier punishments for on-court scuffles in the wake of it, including the rule we have today, where if a player leaves the bench during an altercation, they are automatically suspended for a minimum of 1 game. Entering the playoffs, the Knicks are one of the favorite teams to come out of the East and take down the back-to-back reigning champs, the Chicago Bulls. In the first round, they match up against the Indiana Pacers and this guy. His name is Reggie Miller. He's a notorious agitator, and you should probably get used to hearing his name. In the series, they take game 1 and 2 after some clutch shots by Patrick Ewing. Considering that the Knicks are a 1 seed and the Pacers are the 8 seed, many people believe that this will be an easy sweep for the Knicks. However, back in Indianapolis for game 3, the Pacers trash that narrative as the game starts to get scrappy in proper 90's New York Knicks fashion. The game begins to slip away in the third quarter as the Pacers get hot from 3-point land, but instead of putting up a fight to try and come back, John Starks gets a little too agitated and headbutts Reggie Miller. And while Reggie performs maybe the greatest flop of all time, Starks got ejected and the Knicks got blown out of the game. The Knicks closed the Pacers out in overtime in game 4 to advance to the next round, and while this series wasn't of particular significance, the Knicks-Pacers playoff matchups would soon become the talk of the league for years to come. But that's for a later episode. In the second round, the Knicks make easy work of the Charlotte Hornets in 5 games. Their second round victory leads to an Eastern Conference Finals matchup with the Chicago Bulls, their 4th matchup in 5 years. And while in the previous 3 matchups, the Knicks had always been the feisty underdogs, in this series, the odds were for once evenly matched. As we enter the Eastern Conference Finals, do not for a second think that the heat of the rivalry between the Bulls and the Knicks has dropped off at all. As a matter of fact, the confidence of the Knicks and the history between the two teams meant that it had only gone up to another level. New York's improvement showed as they would take game 1 and 2 at the Garden, a homestand which John Starks would cap off with one of the most iconic plays of the Knicks 90's era. With only 47 seconds left in game 2, he drove hard baseline and, well, just see for yourself.
Left in the fourth quarter. Starks. Yes! What a move by Starks, who was able to sky to the basket. The Bulls call for time.
The dunk iced the game and made sure that the Knicks would travel to Chicago with a big advantage. Game 3 starts with a Ewing tomahawk, and it's really starting to look like Chicago's 3-peat chances are slipping away from them. There's also trash talk going on.
And Starks in the face of Pippen, who just looks to walk away.
And more trash talk.
And look out. They're pushing and shoving. Things could get out of hand. The Knicks now are very frustrated.
And then a lot more trash talk.
Oh, King and Ewing looking to go. Patrick Ewing and Stacey King having words. Now Pippen and Campbell.
And then there's even more trash talk and even a little dose of hold me back.
And Jordan upset because he was quick. Looked like he got scratched by Starks.
But behind a strong game by Pippen, the Bulls take game 3 and look to even the series in game 4. The Knicks play well in game 4 with 5 players scoring in double figures. But again, there was this dude they used to call Air, who put up 54 points to even the series going back to New York. Since New York had home court advantage, the series was still in their favor going into game 5. The game is close, really close. And with the Bulls up 1 in the last few seconds of the game, New York has a golden opportunity to steal the game from them in the last moment.
Ewing for Smith. Stopped again by Pippen. What a play by Scottie Pippen. Final seconds, Jordan for Armstrong. And the Bulls have defeated the Knicks.
Yeah. Chicago wins and are now up 3 games to 2 going back to their home court. However, the game takes a bit of a backseat as the guy they call Air is caught up in controversy which would haunt him for most of his career. It was a distraction to the team and it seemed to affect him as he didn't shoot the ball well for the game. But while Michael Jordan was caught up in that, it was Scottie Pippen, who had really been the MVP of the series, who led the Bulls on that night. The Knicks put up a good fight, but eventually fall to the Bulls 96-88. And so the Knicks season was over after they had had their best regular season in the history of the franchise. The Bulls would go on to win the NBA championship against the Phoenix Suns to complete their three-peat and hopefully lay all the gambling controversy aside. Michael Jordan and the Bulls had now defeated the Knicks in the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years. And it wasn't like they were on the decline. The Knicks and the Bulls were pretty much on the same trajectory in terms of team maturity. The Bulls were just better, and Michael Jordan was just in a different tier from any other superstar in the league. But then something happened which shocked the NBA world and offered the Knicks a window of opportunity to capture that elusive NBA title.
The sense of motivation and the sense of to prove something as a basketball player, it's time for me to move away from the game of basketball. It's not because I don't love the game. I love the game of basketball.